Hurricane Ernesto and Typhoon Ampil both intensifying on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for August 15th. So, a serious situation developing in the Western Pacific. Typhoon Ampil has pulled the red trigger, code red for that storm now, and a big threat to a very high population around the greater Tokyo region of southeastern Japan. Of course, Hurricane Ernesto is also on its way. Next stop, Bermuda, where there's now a hurricane watch. And here it is on day 76 of hurricane season. It is the only system active in the Atlantic, but it is a gradually developing Category 1 hurricane. Good news is it was a little bit slow to get to hurricane status compared to what we were expecting, but it could still get to Category 3. In the Eastern Pacific, we're now seeing an abundance of low pressure systems look like they're going to form as well. A 60% chance to the east there. Hopefully none of these systems will affect land. Certainly two of them are quite far out there, those low to moderate chances. In the Western Pacific, of course, we've got Ampil, which is moving on towards the north now, looks to be potentially rapidly intensifying. Looks good on satellite, possibly more than its Category 1 stage at this point. Also the remnants of Wukong, and another area of interest there that could form near Taiwan early next week. In the North Indian Ocean, there's not too much going on here, just quite a lot of cloud cover over central and northern India and parts of the southwestern coast as well. Over the Bay of Bengal, a few thunderstorms there too, but generally not too much going on from a tropical perspective. However, on the south side, we're now giving a 50%, that's half chance of development for an area of interest that would really be a surprise if it did form down in the southwest Indian Ocean, but it's been a year of off-season storms definitely for this region, and it could add another one to that list. So this is Ampil right now. There is a gale advisory for the Ogasawara and southern Itsu Islands, those islands just to the north of it, some of those in the distances there, such as Torishima, which is 157 kilometers from the center of the storm, Aogashima, 375 kilometers, Mikurojima, 528, that's the northern Itsu Islands, then to Tokyo, 720 kilometers away, and Nagoya, 769. Although that city should not be affected by the storm. And looking at Ernesto then, moving northwestwards, currently 292 kilometers from the closest point, which right now is Coburn Town on the Turks and Caicos Islands. It's 556 from Crooked Island on the Bahamas, 954 from Nassau, 1163 from Bermuda under that hurricane watch, and 1601 from a distant Cape Hatteras on the US East Coast. The storm will gradually be moving more of a north-northeasterly direction as it passes Bermuda and could be a threat to Atlantic Canada, but really shouldn't be a threat to the United States. The chance of tropical storm force winds is around 7%. Let's check the satellite imagery then. First of all, we're looking at Typhoon Ampil there, which looks to be looking really good on the visible imagery here. Really nice spiral banding there, and certainly the convection around the center is looking quite impressive. The eye appears to be clearing out on that satellite imagery as well as we look at the wider scale, and now back up close again, and you can see the storm's movement is generally northwards. The biggest question here is just how close will it get to Tokyo before it turns towards the northeast. That turn will be quite abrupt, and so it's going to be a very close call, and it will likely be a major typhoon Category 3 by the time it gets towards its final approach and closest approach to those cities in southeastern Japan. The strongest storm to ever make landfall in Tokyo was the typhoon of 1917, which produced 115 mph winds and a pressure of 947 millibars. Now this is Ernesto, which is strengthening as well. No clear sign of an eye there on satellite imagery, at least. Obviously, the last radar that we saw when it was leaving the Puerto Rico radar obviously showed an eye. but potentially little bits there from that late visible imagery on the Force 13 floaters. This is the water vapor imagery as well, really throwing up a massive bulk of convection in those latest frames. Recon are in the storm as well right now, I believe, although I've not had time to check the actual stats that they're getting, but it wouldn't be surprising to see if this storm has strengthened a little bit from that 75 mile per hour estimate that they gave the storm at 5 p.m. Eastern. There it is, leaving the radar coverage from Puerto Rico. It's now back out to just the satellite coverage as it moves over the western Atlantic. This is a brief look at what's left of Son Tin, which is still active just near the Kuril Islands there, obviously long gone and a remnant low. We've had 4 storms in the western Pacific in the last week. If you missed it, there's another one, Wukong. That looks to be dead now as well. You can just about see the edge of Ampil there to the southwest, and this is Invest 90S, that southwest Indian Ocean system. And quite hard to see exactly what's going on with this imagery because it's moving around quite a lot, but you can see just at the end there a little flurry of convection there too, signs of potentially a deepening low, and could it possibly be the beginnings of this tropical cyclone? We'll wait and see whether we get some more clear-cut imagery. Here's the east coast of the United States, and looking out over the western Atlantic there, a lot of low-level cloud there entering the picture. I'm not sure what that's coming from. And there you can see Ernesto, obviously. There is still actually some Saharan dust to the west of it there, tracing into the central Caribbean. Ernesto itself is doing okay, although the National Hurricane Center remarked that it was struggling with dry air earlier on. Here's the eastern Atlantic off the coast of Africa, looking out for our next tropical wave. Well, there's one moving off the coast right there, throwing up some decent convection. Eastern Pacific, 1 or 2 little systems there. The 60% one that we've marked is probably the one on the right, and we might start to see some more sustained development soon, but nothing yet. Western Pacific just looking up towards Typhoon Ampil at the top of the picture there, but the Philippine Sea is remaining generally quiet, not too much going on at the lower latitudes. North Indian Ocean and the Indochina region, lots of convection and storms, mainly towards the west, but there's also 1 or 2 little areas in the northern part of Myanmar, and also off the coast of western India there's a few little storms blowing up. That's what the satellites look like all around the world right now. Looking at sea surface temperatures, they are obviously still quite toasty and will be for some time yet in the eastern Pacific. There's 2 little banks of warm water there, but the main one being off the coast of Mexico, 30 degrees plus. Look at the Atlantic, extremely hot temperatures off the coast of Louisiana, over 32 degrees Celsius. Ahead of Ernesto, temperatures will be rising a little bit as it approaches Bermuda, 29 to 30 degrees, then they'll drop again. Western Pacific, extremely warm waters around the Japanese Ryukyu Islands, so I think we'll be seeing many more storms on the way here, looking at those extremely warm temperatures across the board really. Where Ampil is, it's around 29 to 30 degrees as well. Bay of Bengal building up heat again in the central part of the bay there off the east coast of India, up to 30 degrees Celsius. Compared to average, we're seeing quite a few areas that are well above normal in the Atlantic and across the globe. The Atlantic, though, up to 3 degrees above average in parts of the Gulf. Ahead of Ernesto, it's around 2 to 3 degrees when it gets to Bermuda, and off the coast of the Eastern Pacific, it's quite good as well. Look at Japan, though, and the areas just off there, extreme values, up to 5 and possibly over 5 degrees above average in those extratropical zones well out east of Hokkaido. Oceanic heat content is still bustling as well across the Philippine Sea, extremely high energy values there, and quite a bit to the east of Taiwan and through the Japanese Ryukyu Islands as well, where Ampil is not quite so much, although a little bank of it as it heads northwards off Tokyo. Eastern Pacific, a few little spots there. Atlantic also looking very good across large chunks of the Caribbean Sea. It's building back up again. For Ernesto, only limited success there with the energy amounts, but it will certainly manage to sustain itself and intensify quite a bit. But how much? This is what the GFS is predicting then on the computer model runs. It's turning northeastwards there, and then it makes a run for Bermuda as a strong category 2, maybe even a category 3 at some point, and then continuing that direction pretty much unhindered apart from that little wobble around Bermuda, which happens quite suspiciously. Also delivers a lot of rain as it does so. There it is, wobbling around, and then it moves northeastwards slowly at first and then more quickly as it gets picked up and lifted very close to Newfoundland towards the end of that 5-day period. Looking at the Eastern Pacific, we can see possibly those systems developing. The GFS is actually picking up on one way out to the left-hand side there. We haven't marked that one, but one that enters the Central Pacific as a tropical storm and moves towards Hawaii. Other models aren't really on board with that one yet, but you'll also see two other systems that attempt to form, and I think they do succeed if we just watch this again. One on the left, one on the right-hand side there, developing into a tropical storm, and maybe one in the middle there as well. Here's Ampil moving northwesterly at first and then starts to turn northeast, but it's too late because typhoon conditions reach the eastern coast of Japan, the Chiba region, and could also affect, of course, Tokyo itself. Could it be typhoon force winds for the capital? Yes, possibly, looking at that imagery, and quickly jumping back to the southwest Indian Ocean, where you can see that possible system developing there as well. It's a busy tropics right now. Looking at the precipitation from Ernesto, well, there's very high amounts of rain there, helped on by a front that's ahead of the storm, producing very high amounts of rain over Bermuda. Some of those areas in the vicinity of the island could get up to 24 inches. Looks like it's just at sea. Bermuda itself possibly getting 12 inches of rain, that's 300 millimeters, but certainly the potential for it to double. In parts of the Greater Antilles, going up towards 3 inches of further rainfall, and up in Canada, not looking at very much rain actually on the weaker left-hand side of the storm. Now, this is for Ampil and the Tokyo region and all of Japan. Rainfall maybe not as much of an impact as the potential winds there, and it looks like it could get to maximums of 8 inches according to this graphic on the mainland. That is 200 millimeters of rain, but some areas further towards the south, some of those islands, the Itsu Islands, could get up towards 12 inches, 300 millimeters, maybe a little bit more. On the eastern side of the storm, that's very much the wettest part, but it should stay out at sea, 400 millimeters. In the longer range, day 5 through 10, you can see Ernesto then scraping past Newfoundland. Tropical storm force winds briefly felt on the island, and then the storm continues out over the northern Atlantic and forms and merges into a part of an enormous, gigantic other extratropical cyclone there, and looks set to harass Iceland and the British Isles and parts of Greenland as it moves way up into the polar latitudes of northern Europe. In the Eastern Pacific, the development of these systems continues. There you can see the one on the right hand side does finally fully develop into a tropical storm and maybe a hurricane there moving northwestwards, although still no signs of our first major hurricane yet in the Eastern Pacific. And then 3 systems developing in the end out of that, so 4 in the entire model run. Those 2 on either side of it also developing towards the end of that 10-day period. Another busy time perhaps in the Eastern Pacific. And then following this southwest Indian Ocean system, again a big surprise if it does indeed develop, although it's really struggling by this point, gradually moving westwards, remnant low, but still could affect the weather over there in the Seychelles. Watch again there, tropical storm possibly at the beginning, that's on day 5. By the time we get to day 10, this system looks like it is history, much like the other ones that did attempt to form back in May. That's the serious stuff done. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a look at all of our items as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request. And are still waiting for a Hone t-shirt. Well, did that model run give you any hope that we might see a Hone? Maybe, maybe not. Well, in the Scilly range, we're still looking at the Eastern Pacific there at those 3 systems, that trio that continues on, and that second, the one on the left-hand side getting close to Hawaii again, and then the one on the right there becoming a small system just off the Baja California Peninsula and weakens and dies off just before it gets pulled into making landfall in the end. So, just to recap there, that I think is 5 separate systems in the Eastern Pacific for that whole 16-day period. I think there's a little low pressure system in the Gulf of Mexico there as well towards the end of that run, or in the middle of it, tracing towards Texas, possibly a depression. Well, what happened on this day? It was 1985, where we had another hurricane landfall in the United States. It was Hurricane Danny's turn, which made landfall in western Louisiana as a Category 1. There's radar imagery of it there. Claudette became a hurricane on this day as well, so we had double hurricanes active, and they're both as strong as Ernesto right now. Meanwhile, in the Western Pacific, two tropical depressions, one that was unrecognized at the time, so it's just got the TD label there over the inland over Vietnam and China, and 10W, which was out towards the northern Philippine Islands. Well, back to today, we are code red, and we may be having live coverage throughout the course of Thursday and definitely Friday. In the Atlantic, though, the next name on the list now is Francine, new addition. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Gilmer, and in the Central Pacific, of course, it is still Hone. In the Western Pacific, the next name now is Yongdari, and in the North Indian Ocean, it will be Asna. Reminder of Yongdari last time around was also a menace to Japan, swiping across the southern coast, moving westwards in 2018. In the Australian region, the next name is Robin. When we start up down there in the Southwest Indian Ocean, it will be Ansha, could be happening soon. And in the South Pacific, the next name is Pitta. That's it from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night if we're not already live.
Become an ultimate fan today.